But what do you make of the overall distribution of relief funds in terms of who it's helped, who it's hurt, and how it should be changed?
Well, it was never going to be perfect. And I think after the initial and probably inevitable stories of big businesses getting checks that were supposed to go to small and medium-sized businesses, things have improved. But let's keep this in perspective. We're experiencing as big an economic shock as that of the Great Depression, but at roughly 10 times the speed. Unemployment has surged as it did in the period after 1929, but just much, much faster. And it's really quite hard, therefore, to expect anything other than distress among smaller and medium-sized businesses because they're just so much more exposed to the supply and the demand shock. Remember, a big piece of the S&P 500 is big technology companies like Amazon and Microsoft, which are in fact relative beneficiaries of a pandemic because the sort of tendency to virtualize the world has been accelerated too. But that's just not something that's happening for you if you're a small or medium-sized business. You are very, very much impacted by the combination of economic lockdowns and social distancing that have been necessitated by the pandemic.
You know, it seems to me that there's a broad range of programs meant to help companies at all ranges. Obviously, on the biggest side of it, the Fed's directly buying corporate bonds. On the smallest side of it, they have the Small Biz Program, which currently has outstanding funds that can be distributed. So that demand has started to dry up, but that program is still there. In the middle, Neil, was supposed to be the Federal Reserve's Main Street lending program, which, as many people have pointed out, they've been kind of slow to get up and running. The terms are somewhat punitive in terms of the banks basically just kind of treating these as regular loans. So they might give them to their best customers instead of to all the ones who might need the help. So, you know, is that the problem, that there's this donut, this big hole in the middle where all these people with up to $6 trillion of Fed support are supposed to potentially be getting that Main Street help? And as of right now, they're not getting it.
Well, I don't think anybody could fault the Federal Reserve or indeed Congress and the U.S. Treasury for trying to get as much money out the door to as many people as possible. But anything that ultimately delegates the distribution of resources to private sector banks, as has happened, is bound to end up with glitches because, let's face it, as anybody who's been through this process knows, and I've been through it myself as a small business owner, you have a combination of government bureaucracy and then bank bureaucracy, and banks themselves have suddenly found their role transformed into conduits for government funding. My own personal view of this is that the real question's not so much is enough money going out the door, because unprecedented amounts are going out the door. This is as if we were fighting World War II over again in terms of its impact on the Fed balance sheet and its impact on the federal government's deficit. But that's really not the crucial factor. What's driving the economy is a public health emergency that we have not yet got under control. Actually, there are only 4 states of the United States that have the pandemic under control. I happen to be in one of them, Montana. The others are Alaska, Hawaii, and Vermont. And nowhere else can it really be said to have been brought under control. I think we spend too much time on shows like this talking about it as if it's a financial crisis and expecting it to be solved by a central bank. You cannot solve a pandemic with monetary policy or, for that matter, with fiscal policy. And as long as there is an ongoing public health problem in the majority of states of the union, then there is going to be a profound economic crisis. And let me add one more point. Even when the lockdown are ended, don't expect consumers to go rushing out the door to sit down in restaurants or crowd into shopping malls. We at Greenmantle have just done a report on the situation in Georgia, which has ended the lockdown ahead of every other state. The response in terms of consumer behavior suggests that even when lockdowns end, social distancing continues.